I also only had 1 cup of coffee this morning for the translator's sake. I hope that we will, I will speak slow enough so that everybody can understand, but I get very excited when talking about this subject, and I hope by the time we're done today that you will also be very excited. So my name is Amy Reinhardt. I started off in online news in 1996, and I've worked to the side of journalism or to help journalists in some capacity since that point. First Draft started 18 months ago. There were 9 founding partners. All of them were working in the space of verification. One of my favorite people on here, or organizations, is Bellingcat. The person's name is Elliot Higgins, and he's done some of the most amazing work in verification. So if you're looking to be a student, he is somebody to learn from, for sure. So when First Draft started, it felt like we were the only ones talking about the problem of misinformation. We decided to develop a website with resources for journalists and for training. We also thought it was important to begin talking about establishing standards within the industry. So on our website today, there are many resources, videos, tutorials. They last maybe about a minute, and most of them are how to do something, so it's not so much English language. So you'll be able to, I hope, get some information from there on how basic steps. I should say that in the US we rely on a lot of Google products. A lot of our social media platforms that are most prevalent are Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And I know that you have different platforms here too, but most of how these platforms behave are very similar. One of the biggest achievements really of First Draft so far is to bring together about 90 global news partners to get together every 3 or 4 months and ask the questions: what are we doing to shape this space? How are we training each other? How can we help each other? You know, all of these news organizations are used to being competitors, and it's a very new territory for everyone to be, how can we work together? But the problem of misinformation is so big that we think, First Draft believes, that the only way to help resolve some of this is by working together. So to that end, we started Crosscheck. Crosscheck is an online verification newsroom. It's also collaborative. This idea came about at one of our partner network meetings. And we needed a scalable project, meaning something that was specific to an event, but also was manageable in size. So we decided to focus on the French election. This was all after, I should say, the US election in November last year. We looked ahead at the calendar and said, what is the most important thing that we can get involved in? Where can we make an impact? And we decided the French election was something to start an initiative with. We now have 37 news partners. Some are French, or most are French. Some are from the UK. And we launched a website. This was all about a month ago, so this is very new. We launched in 2 languages, French and English. I don't recommend doing that, right, for a first project, because everything was so new. It was one layer of complexity that maybe we didn't need, but the idea is to get as much information out there as possible, and having more than one language was helpful to that. So here in the middle, we have a question that was posed by a reader, and the newsrooms collaborated together to see, is that true? And all of these newsrooms played some part in solving or answering the question. And once they said, yes, you know, I believe that this information is fabricated, then we have all of the newsroom partners who participated front and center on the website. This is a grand experiment. We're not sure if this display of logos will help public trust. We have no idea, but we're excited to see. And it's also a lot of fun to work with other newsrooms. Sometimes when you work in the digital space, you're often reporting to people who are traditional journalists, and it's a lonely environment. So it's nice to work with other people who are going through the same problems and issues. And because this is a newer space, all ideas are interesting and worth talking about, I think. On the website itself, we have an area for people to click through to pose their question. Each one of our 37 news partners also has an embedded form on their website, inviting readers to ask their question to cross-check. So in the United States, we reached the interest in fake news. My boss, Claire Wardle, has worked in this space for 10 years. Some people were interested in her research, but overnight, everybody wanted Claire to talk about fake news because suddenly it was a new issue for the United States. Our president was elected, and people said a lot of it was due to fake news. Had the election gone the other way, I don't know if we'd be up here talking about fake news, but it has changed the course of the United States, and so now people are interested. What is this? So we reached the interest in fake news. We reached a peak January 11th of this year. Does anybody have an idea of what might have caused that peak? Well, the election. There was something related to it specifically. President-elect Trump held a news conference, and he declared specific news organizations to be fake news. And so that reached the apex there. And in Korea, the two search terms that are common surrounding fake news reached a peak here between February 5th and February 11th of this year. So we have a lot of things in common in terms of awareness and interest and people seeing that this is a problem. So fake news is a term that has been circulating to a point where it means everything, and because of that it means nothing. Politicians in particular, politicians in the United States are using fake news to weaponize the media and information to call things that they don't like fake news. That's it's not entirely new for the U.S., but it's so prevalent among politicians today there that it's jarring to see. So we are trying to establish a wider vocabulary and not just calling something fake news, but specifically what type of fake news, what kind of flavor of fake news. And every country and every region seems to have one type of fake news that is more prevalent than another. So we also like to call it the misinformation ecosystem. So misinformation, as we define it, is information that's false, but the person who's disseminating it believes it to be true. That might be a journalist who maybe made a mistake in an article. They weren't intentionally causing the mistake. I think most journalists want to crawl under a rock if they find out that they've made a mistake in their story. So it's not done maliciously, but it is misinformation. Then we have disinformation, where the information that's put out is false. The person knows that when they're creating it and sending it out that it's false. It's deliberate and it's done with intent, often with a specific motivation: money, power, trying to be persuasive in that space. So at First Draft, we also break down the verification process. There's the act of fact-checking, which most people on a news desk are familiar with. It's going through assertions made, often with official sources, before print or before publication, and checking to make sure everything is accurate, or as accurate as we know it to be. Then there's verification, and you get to put a Sherlock Holmes hat on and try and discover, is this photo real? Is it original? Is it true to the story that's associated with it? Those are often unofficial sources. This is called user-generated content, or also known as UGC. It could be what they call citizen journalists, an eyewitness to media, and that's where, for journalists who, if they're doing their job right, prefer accountability, if they can't just run something that went on Instagram or Twitter, they have to verify the source and get permission for the source. So our friend Alexios at Pointer runs the International Fact Checkers Coalition, and there is a middle space called debunking that is really at the intersection of fact-checking and verification. Debunking happens when the false information is out there, and it's circulating, and people are exchanging something that they want to believe likely to be true. And then we at First Draft and other people who verify go back and say, actually, that's not true. This part is untrue. This element is false. This is partially true, but out of context. So we've come up with 7 types of mis- and disinformation. And again, we're not quite sure. Does this complicate things for people, or does it help? I think it's an effort to elevate the conversation around fake news, because once you start asking specific questions to people who like to share fake news, I think that the awareness is broadened. So on the far, I guess that's left for you, there's satire and parody. And I'll have examples for each one of these. Satire, parody, people who want to make light of a situation to get you to laugh. I've needed that lately, and I like parody websites. But my mom doesn't understand sometimes that this particular website, is a joke. There's misleading content, information to frame an issue or an individual. There's imposter content. When we talked with our APAC partners this week in Hong Kong, our Philippine partners said that they were seeing a lot of imposter content. Logos that have been manipulated for a political agenda or cause. Imposter content where a website, a legitimate news website, has a shadow site with misinformation. So that's, at least for in the Philippines, that's a problem that they're seeing. Fabricated content is news or information that is mostly false. There's oftentimes just a small fraction of the information that's true, like this person is a human. That is true. But where they said they were going to be doing what they said they were going to be, that's a different story. There's also false connection, where the headlines and the visuals don't support the content. That's often, you'll see that in clickbait articles, articles with lots of exclamation points in the headlines, question marks, all caps, something to get people to click and make money for that platform. There's false context, when genuine content is shared with false contextual information. And then there's manipulated content, when genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive. That's oftentimes a Photoshop document that has been doctored, or a video that has been spliced with another. So an example of satire parody in the United States, we have a news source called The Onion. And they say here, Earth ranked #1 party planet, which is not true. It's Mars. Everybody knows that. But it's almost every country has one. I'm sure Korea has a parody. Or no? Yeah. There's misleading content. So some of the indicators here are the all caps, the exclamation point, the ... No news source I read typically has those indicators. And when I clicked through to read the article, she met Donald Trump. That's it. Many people have met Donald Trump this past year. And it's sort of a nothing story. But I clicked, and when I clicked, all of these advertisements populated on the page, and they got exactly what they wanted from me, which is their attention. This is an example of an imposter content. This is from the United States. ABC News is one of the major networks, and this person has created, they use the exact logo, and they have some kind of legitimate, it looks like a legitimate website. The great thing about the web is it's easy to make a website. And the bad thing about the web is it's easy to make a website. So this, to me, was a big indicator, too. abcnews.com.co. In the United States, most websites end .com, .edu, .gov, but that extension on the end of it is unusual. And we'll talk more about this particular site, I think, after the break. There's fabricated content. This traded on the internet wildly about the last month of the election, that Pope Francis said Donald Trump was great for president. That was not true, and in fact he came out against him, so that's why people were trading in. There was also many pieces of deliberate misinformation, actually disinformation, that went out. This one says you can vote for Hillary by text message. There were a lot of problems around the election with early voting and very long lines. So people who didn't want to see Hillary in was like, oh, you can take a shortcut in text. And some people believed that. There's false context that gets traded online frequently. Photos of kids are always great. It's emotional. Images resonate with people so much faster than text. In this situation, the Twitter handle Historical Pics posted this photo of a sister being protected by her 4-year-old brother, and they're saying that this is happening in Nepal. But a few hours later, the photographer said, this is not from Nepal. I shot this 7 years ago. And it's with 2 Vietnamese Hmong ethnic children. That's not what it's about at all. The big problem with this is you can see there were 7,000 retweets. 7,000 people shared it with their networks. The corrected version was shared with fewer than half that number. So I don't think this changed the outcome of the world. But again, it's these little things that build up day by day when you're seeing information that is incorrect. Is anybody familiar with this photo at all? It's from North Korea, and this photo has been manipulated. If you can see, the water here is similar here, here, here. I mean, it looks like they've got this massive army. And I think it was just the 2 boats coming in this one. I even think this has been set up. But it's images like this get traded a lot on social. This is from Iran. These are rocket launches. And this photo shows 4. The problem with this is there was also a video taken that day. And in the video, it was very clear that not all 4 launched. The New York Times debunked this, and showing that the cloud here is the same as the cloud there. I hope once you start seeing some of these that you'll never look at an image in quite the same way again. But this one was pretty fun to review. This image, people were saying, oh, isn't it terrible? This poor, I can't remember where, was it Syria or Yemen? Maybe they were saying Yemen, that this child was between the mother and the father, their graves. Isn't this sad? Actually, the photo was taken by a photographer who does museum work. And this is her nephew. And it was staged, and it was taken 3 years earlier in Syria. And the little boy is pretty happy. So it's not this sad photo that's been reported. There's lazy reporting can also go into misinformation. This report was given Amnesty International's logo is there, and they wanted to do a UN bodies logo, but this is actually a children's sports club. And she's standing there, she's probably now recognizing the mistake they made. This is of a Danish television host. Does the background look familiar to anyone? Any gamers in the audience? Because they used a game for the background. So journalists, we have to get better. So here is our misinformation checklist. Oftentimes with a report, you can tick off several boxes for what it is. And all of the motivations are very different. We've come up with, in our language, 8 Ps of misinformation, just trying to make a shortcut for it. There's poor journalism, to parody something or satire, to provoke, or as we call it sometimes, to punk someone, to fool someone. Passion, partisanship, for profit, political influence, and propaganda. Let's see here. And now we can take questions about what we've covered so far, and then we'll have a short break.
안녕하세요. 미디어 오늘의 감중현 기자라고 합니다. 다름이 아니라 아까 크로스 체크 관련해서 한국에서도 비슷한 시도가 좀 있기는 한데, 한국에서는 개별의 언론사들이 따로 팩트 체크를 하고 또 그냥 모아놓는 수준으로 일단 하고 있는데요. 프랑스 현지에서는 여러 언론사들이 이거를 정말 같이 토론하고 논의해서 답을 내는 건데, 또 의혹이나 이런 경우에는 사실인 거랑 사실이 아닌 거랑 모호한 경우에는 또 어떤 식으로 논의를 하는지 이런 식으로 찾아보는 게 궁금합니다.
Thank you. That's a good question. The French like to talk. And it's oftentimes one person who takes the lead and begins the verification process. And as they begin the verification process, they are talking about their steps. And we'll talk about the steps after the break. And people can comment on that. We use Slack, which is a real-time conversation that you can direct message people and also have a hashtag to curate the conversation. People, I'm impressed and want to talk to you more about how Korean newsrooms prioritize this. It's not true in America. They do not, verification and user-generated content. It's not, there's very few times that there's a system in place in the news organization. And so for capacity terms, for our project like Crosscheck, we had a large organization, AFP, take the lead for the verification. And they said they wanted to work collaboratively because they thought that by working together, they could learn and teach other newsrooms about the verification process. We had a small publisher called Rue 98 in Strasbourg who said, we have no money, we have no tools, we have no idea what we're doing, but we're so happy to partner with these other organizations so that we can learn, so that we don't have to spend our time verifying things, that we can use the verification and write our own stories about this. So each newsroom will have a different angle on a story, but it's the verification. If we could have one place that says yes, and other people believe that, and believe them to be the authority in verification, I think newsrooms then could go back to doing what they're so good at, which is telling stories about these.
Hi, I'd like to ask you about the deliberate selection of so-called experts. That seems to be quite a common way of spreading perhaps misinformation or disinformation these days, especially with climate change. So you've got 97% of scientists saying it's human caused, but some certain media outlets always manage to find an expert who disagrees with that. And you also saw it recently with the so-called Swedish military expert. I think it was on Fox News, maybe.
Likely.
Is that a problem that you come up against often? And how would you classify it?
I think specifically in American media that there's a lot of soul searching for giving airtime to deliberate misinformation or trying to appear balanced when it comes to climate change. It's not fair to give climate deniers as much airtime as the scientists, just because of the preponderance of the evidence. 97% of scientists say climate change is real and is escalating by human efforts. So I think that the American press has really had a hard time covering Donald Trump. Some media say we're not going to call his information lies because lies insinuates intent. They could call it lazy, maybe. He often says, well, I read it somewhere. And, that's what your crazy Uncle Harold says. I read it somewhere. And you're like, crazy Uncle Harold, where and when? And can I see that report? And then suddenly the answers are, I don't know, I'm not, somewhere, and there's never, the lack of specificity is often an indicator that somebody is sitting on very hollow footing, or standing on very hollow footing. But I don't know, I think that there'll be a recalibration in the United States specifically to not necessarily be fair and balanced. Christian Amanpour, who is the lead international correspondent at CNN, said that she wants to be truthful and accurate. That especially in totalitarian regimes, there's no room for being balanced. A crime is a crime. And she is often the voice or the leader in the conscience of journalism in the U.S. So I hope other people will listen to that. But we've had a lot to think about the American press since Donald Trump's election. The news networks there gave him a lot of airtime prior to the election. I think some of them are regretting that now because they gave him more airtime than many other candidates because he's fun to watch. Anytime I post a tweet or a Facebook post, to readers from First Draft, if the word Trump is in there, it almost always gets more engagement. So he's clickable, not likable.
저는 질문이 두 가지가 있는데요. 일단 첫 번째 질문은 아까 미국에서는 이번 대선을 기점으로 가짜뉴스에 대한 관심이 급증했다고 말씀을 하셨는데 그 전에 대선에서는 크게 문제가 된 적이 없는지, 그리고 그 가짜뉴스의 위험성이 SNS 사용자가 미국에서 급증했기 때문이지 아니면 다른 사회적 모순 때문에 가짜뉴스가 진짜 양적으로 늘어나서 문제가 된 건지가 제 첫 번째 질문이고요. 그리고 두 번째 질문은 이 아까 misinformation, disinformation.
Oh wait, maybe we should go first question. Can you say that again? The question.
So my question is that.
Oh.
네. 미국에서는 그 대선을 기점으로 가짜뉴스에 대한 관심이 급증했다고 하는데 예전 대선에서는
Right.
문제가 된 적이 없는지, 그리고 양적으로 이게 가짜뉴스가 증가를 한 것인지.
Honestly, I think it's because everybody was shocked by the election results. Nobody expected Trump to win the primaries, and nobody expected him. I don't even think I'd be here today on this stage if Hillary Clinton were president. You know, having Trump elected president has been so disruptive. I also think mobile handsets were popular in 2008, but not like now. I think people consume news. They're scrolling. They're not thinking. They're looking at a headline that they agree with or that resonates with them emotionally, and they're sharing it. And the more anxious a person feels, the more likely they will share something ridiculous. So misinformation was exchanged to a higher degree by conservatives before the election because they felt very anxious about the election. Almost immediately after the election, there was mis and disinformation being shared by liberals and conservatives in equal measure. Even more, I think, for the liberals because they felt very anxious after the election. So it's emotional. The election was an enormous surprise. There were the increase of mobile users. I also think that misinformation, disinformation has been weaponized by other countries. We're still learning about Russia's influence. So all of those factors really created a perfect storm that has real consequences that people are shocked about. So that's when change and awareness happens.
두 번째는 그 아까 말씀하신 disinformation 관련된 얘기인데요. 그 실제로 그 가짜 뉴스가 유포될 때는 이 두 가지가 얽혀 있을 것 같거든요. 그래서 유포자는 disinformation을 유포할 수 있지만 그거를 이제 공유하고 하는 사람들은 실제로 이게 사실이라고 믿고 배포를 할 수 있을 것 같은데 이 두 가지를 어떻게 구분하고 떼내는 작업을 어떻게 하는지가 좀 궁금합니다.
I think we should probably classify it based on the originator and their intent, and not the sharer. The sharer is probably anxious or worried, excited about something. They think it's funny, whether it's satire for real or whether it's just so crazy, like the Pope endorses Trump. You know, I might have shared that with, my brother. Just because it's so preposterous, and so I don't. Does that answer your question? Okay.
네, 크로스책 같은 프로젝트에서 제 생각에는 모든 언론사가 같은 결론을 내지 않은 경우가 있을 수도 있을 것 같거든요. 그런 경우에는 어떻게 판단을 하시는지, 어떻게 판단을 했는지가 하나가 궁금하고요. 또 한 가지는 뉴스가 first of true로 그렇게 레이트가 되지 않는 경우들도 있잖아요. 그런 경우에는 어떻게 처리하시는지 궁금합니다.
Okay, so for the first question about cross-check, journalists love to talk about this stuff, and I think the debate is spirited, but we don't publish anything until everybody agrees. You know, and we'll get into verification steps too, but there are places where it used to be news organizations would say this piece of information cannot be independently verified, which is, if you're a reader, that's really frustrating. It's like, at what point can't you verify it? Do you not know where it was taken? Do you not know who took it? Do you not know where it was uploaded? Like, if we can tell them what we do know about it, and also say what we don't know about it, that's better information than just saying we can't verify it 100%. And for user-generated content, it will be rare when you get 100% verification on something. What was your second question?
첫 번째 질문에서 좀 더 부각을 하고 싶은데요. 그러니까 언론사들이 서로 다른 결론을 냈을 경우에 어떻게 디스전을 하는지 궁금하고요.
We just talk it through. We talk. I mean, it's a democracy in that sense. And I think if somebody has an issue with it, that it's a valid concern, you know. But I do think some of the things are so clear that that there's not dissent on the ones that are just clearly wrong.
그렇다면 외부가 동의하지 않는 경우에도 스토리로 쓰여지는 경우가 있는 건가요?
I think the cases in this situation have been so clear that there has been consensus when we publish. So we haven't gotten to that yet. When we have our private meeting about how cross-check went, I'll be curious to see if they entered into fisticuffs over the information. But wouldn't that be great? Like, I want people to argue over this and to be conflicted and to try and get the truth out there. And I think that's an argument worth having.
이게 어떤 뉴스 같은 경우는 이게 가짜 뉴스다, 이게 진실이다라고 정확하게 알려지가 않고 그 중간에 어느 지점인 경우도 있을 수 있을 거거든요. 그럼
Right. In that case, you might be looking at false context. It's the headline, you know, is a clickbait headline where it says something astonishing that you won't believe, all exclamation points, and then you read in the story about it seems like a different topic altogether, you know. And again, even with fabricated content, it's not 100% false, you know. If they're saying two humans are in the photo, there are two humans in the photo. The thing that's in question, were they where they said they were? Are they who they said they were? You know, are they photoshopped together? It's very rare where you'll have something 100% fabricated. So I think the trickiest type of misinformation is probably discerning what is maybe just partisanship, somebody's point of view, their slant, and how much, if they're giving misinformation in there that supports their agenda. That's hard. The stuff that is fabricated and you've got, you know, a whale and a bear together, that's easy. The satire too is easy. It's the stuff in the middle that's harder, and it's probably what people argue about the most.
Thank you.
네, 여기 질문.
저도 두 가지 질문이 있는데요. 예, 저는 그 페널티에 대한 질문입니다. 그 독일에서는 거짓말을 유통을 시킨 포털의 경우 최대 우리나라 돈 600억 정도의 벌금을 내야 하는 것을 논의하는 것으로 알고 있는데요. 그렇다면 이제 거짓 뉴스에 대한 경제적 제재 논의, 과연 뭐 국가가 됐던 기관이 됐던 그런 것은 어떻게 생각하는가 첫 번째로 궁금하고.
We'd be rich, I think, if we had a penalty like that, but I think it would be difficult to collect. I think we would be better served by having the platforms have higher standards and faster responses to mis and disinformation, to pull the information, to deprioritize it in a search result. I also think that there has to be some kind of public shaming about it, like drinking and driving, or wearing a seatbelt, or not smoking. Like, all of those things used to be standard, at least in the United States. And now there's such, you can't drink and drive. There's a public shaming about it. You don't want to smoke, you want to live to be old. In the same way, we want to say, you wouldn't share that, fake news like you're crazy Uncle Harold. You don't want to be crazy Uncle Harold. You want to be a smart person, a person who cares about truth. So there's a way we can change the public perception of people who share mis and disinformation, and also the platforms have to have higher standards and implement faster.
네, 그리고 그 언론사의 경우 그 속보와 그 단독 경쟁이 많은데요. 만약에 이제 엄격한 입증 책임과 버든 프로필 같은 부담을 느끼면 과정을 통한 보도가 위축될 우려가 있는데, 혹시 긍정적 요소가 많다는 건 알지만 엄격한 팩트체크나 입증 책임을 기자나 언론사나 그들에게 이제 부담을 지어준다면 그 보도 과정의 위축이 혹시 발생하지 않는지, 그런 원인은 없었는지 궁금합니다.
I mean, that's why you're journalists, right? I mean, we want to print the truth. Not all publishers, they do, look, all news has to answer to something, right? If it's a state-owned company, it has to answer to the state. If it's a publicly traded company, it has to answer to shareholders. One problem in the United States is that the big broadcasters are owned by these multinational corporations. I hope that something like ABC News, which is owned by Disney, I hope if something goes down at Disney that we know the full truth, but sometimes I'm suspicious, will ABC News report on them? So we all have some level of self-censorship. We all have to answer to readers. I would like to work for and read news that aspires to the truth and to being fair and balanced. And I hope that it will be the economy that really determines all of this, that maybe the fake news publishers will go out of business or have less business. But all of this is based on economics. There was a recent instance of a fake news maker who posted one image of the same person and positioned it different ways for conservatives and liberals, but it was the same person. He doesn't care. He wants to make money, and I hope that somebody who's reading that will be like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a legitimate news source. So and to that end, I think we have to do better at educating the public in terms of news literacy.
저도 개인적으로 제가 좀 궁금한 질문을 한번 해보겠습니다. 팩트체크의 주체에 대해서 질문이 있는데요. 지금 말씀하신 거는 이제 언론사가 하거나 아니면 개인이 뉴스를 소개함에 있어서 이거 진짜일까 가짜일까 한번 해보자라는 거가 이제 되게 그런 류의 같아요. 이제 사실 우리나라에서는 정부가 또 주도로 팩트체크나 아니면 이제 이런 기준을 마련하고 있는데 또 표현의 자유에 또 위축된다 이런 얘기도 많이 있습니다. 이에 대해서 어떻게 생각하는지 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
Yes. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm an American and we have an incredible amount of press freedom. Sometimes I don't even think we appreciate how much. As an American, I would be very suspicious if the government had criteria for what would be in the news. That said, they could do public service in terms of news literacy. I think about my mother, who is almost 70, and she's from the generation where she went home and turned on the news, and you could try and mostly trust what they were saying. And now she is confronted with news. She's the decider when it comes to news, and I don't think she has that discernment just because of experience. It's a different media world out there now, and she can one ad on one website and she's off somewhere that she doesn't recognize. So I wouldn't mind if the government or libraries initiated a news literacy project. But at this point, I'll take anybody who wants to help with mis and disinformation. The caution with governments is sometimes, often, they want to control the conversation. And now, Donald Trump, for example, has said that news that he doesn't like is fake news. I wish life were that easy, that the news I didn't like was fake news. But if you brand it that, you can delegitimize the press. And now the press has almost a lower ranking than he does in terms of favorable opinion. And it's a problem. Did that answer you? Yeah.
감사합니다. 저희 질문이 두 개만 받고 제가 쉬도록 하겠습니다. 그러면 먼저 한 개씩만 하시죠, 질문요.
강의 내용 중에 가짜뉴스가 트럼프를 당선시켰다는 주장이 있다고 했는데요. 미국에서 실제 여론조사에서는 힐러리 당선을 예측했지 않습니까? 그러면 결국 가짜뉴스는 여론조사에 전혀 영향을 못 미치는 거예요.
Yeah, I want to be clear that I did not say that fake news changed the outcome of the election. I think it influenced, and I think it has influenced. Somebody had asked about since 2008. I think, that there's been a lot of a groundswell of information, disinformation that has built to lead people to a more populist movement. For instance, there was another candidate, Bernie Sanders, who also was incredibly effective at bringing out a populist movement online. I subscribed to his emails, Trump's emails, and Hillary's emails, and also looked at their social media campaigns. And Bernie Sanders, the other person, and Donald Trump had great social media campaigns and great emails. It felt like they were writing them. Whereas Hillary, she's a seasoned politician. She's I think she's close to 70. She was very conservative in her approach to communications. And I think we're not in a time anymore that wants a conservative approach. People are more casual in conversation and in communications, and they want to think their elected officials are real, if that makes sense. And your other part of the question was?
미국에서 계속 여론조사를 했는데 다 힐러리의 당선을 예측했는데 그러면 결국 가짜뉴스가 여론조사에 영향을 못 미친 거 아닌가 이런 생각을 해봅니다.
Right. Okay. So the polls are different. The polls. How do I explain the polls? I think that's one of the reasons why it was such a surprise, because Hillary was polling at 85% up into the election. I think most of the mainstream media did not think Trump was legitimate and didn't talk to many people about it. They just dismissed him. And I think that's a big reason why he was elected, is that he wasn't covered seriously. And because it seemed impossible. All the polls were telling us one thing, and then something else happened. I also think there were a lot of people who were secretly for Trump, and maybe weren't necessarily proud of it, but they wanted a populist in the White House. They wanted real change, and didn't feel that Hillary was the candidate for them. So the polls were off. I hope that in future elections there will be less reliance on polls. For precisely this reason. They were just wrong. They asked the wrong people, or the people who they asked lied. So, yeah.
가짜뉴스는 이제 파급력도 강하지만 굉장히 빠르게 퍼지는데 팩트체크는 검증을 하는 거다 보니까 가짜뉴스가 퍼진 게 이제 나중에 사후적 처리일 수밖에 없는데 이게 그렇게 검증을 다 하고 시간이 지나면 사람들은 아무도 사실 관심이 없게 되거든요. 가짜뉴스가 되게 가짜였는지에 대해서. 근데
네, 이 시간차를 줄이기 위한 노력이나 방법도 지금 논의가 되고 있는지 궁금하거든요.
Yeah, verification, to be clear, happens preferably before we go and publish a report, right? We're verifying the origin of that information. But that's the biggest problem, and you're absolutely right about fake news. From this example here, we have 7,000 people who shared that, and then the follow-up was less than half. But you'll see that in traditional press, whenever there's a retraction or a correction, very few people see that. And it's frustrating, but it's just the nature, I think, of the news and people's appetite for the truth. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in and also respond to that question. I think one thing that is interesting is that there is some innovation in this area as well. You know, some news organizations, for example, Tempo in Indonesia, when they were covering the debate, what they would do is they actually had fact checkers who were working very intensively to fact check statements that the candidates were making, and they would actually publish memes. So, you know, the photo with like the the kind of big block letters, they would publish those very quickly so that people could share them. Another news organization in Thailand, they do fact-checking as well, and so what they have discovered is that if they write text or do a video, that it's not shared as well, but they started doing infographics that, people are very visual, and I know Amy will talk a lot about that, but that's another way that they found was more effective in getting people to share the truth, as opposed to, even after the fact, right? So.
네, 감사합니다. 굉장히 또 열기가 뜨거워지는데요. 제가 그냥 한 가지 딱 들어보는 그러니까 여러분은 저널리스트가 아닙니까? 라는 것 같아요. 정말 그 공정하고 아니면 정말 그 뺄게 반대가 뭔지 모르겠지만 진정성 있는 뉴스를 그래서 쓰시는 게 아닐까라는 생각이 듭니다.
And I was heartened to talk with someone just now who works for a Korean fact-checking organization who said, yes, we're having a hard time penetrating and verifying news that's exchanged on Kakao and other closed platforms. So I just want you to know, we know they exist. We just don't have the materials right now, and hopefully by collaborating with people like you and people in our partner network, we can deliver more verification information on other platforms. The stuff that the information that I'll go over today, I hope will be general enough that it will be applicable to the platforms that you use. One of the things that we want to emphasize with newsrooms is that verification is a process. It is rare that you will have all green lights for your verification steps, and it will be somewhere in the yellow and orange lights, and hopefully not in the red. So the first step in verification is looking at provenance. Are you looking at an original piece of information? The second is the source. Who captured the content? That often indicates motivations. That often can tell you where the source came from or where the information came from.
Sorry, do you want to mention?
That's coming. The sheet that you have there has the checklist. So each one of these 5 things that are coming up on the screen now is also on the handout. Thank you. So date, when was the content captured? That's oftentimes very different than the date that it was uploaded. And I'll have examples for each one of these. Location, where was the content captured? If somebody says they were in Brussels and there's an airport explosion at the airport, it's important to know that they were there. Motivation, why was the content captured? Again, that often indicates the profit model. It often indicates the person's intentions of what they want to do in terms of persuasion and spreading misinformation. So the first step, provenance, are you looking at an original piece of content? We want to alert people of scrapes. Scrapes are when you go to a website like YouTube and you download the video and then you upload it to your site or to your channel in YouTube, oftentimes for profit motivations. And so that gets rid of all of the metadata, it gets rid of the origin of the piece. So you can take credit for it or give credit to somebody else. You also want to be aware of composites. I've lived in New York for about 20 years and I've never seen the Statue of Liberty like this. That's because this cloud structure is actually from Iowa, about 1,500 miles away. So if something looks too good to be true, it probably is. So this is a quick video on debunking online fakes and hoaxes. It's a reverse image search. The cool thing about this is it takes about 20 minutes to figure out if this image is where they say it's from and to discover the provenance of the image. Sorry if it's louder. Yeah, I wanted to turn it down, but then it goes out of the screen. So it's not going to last much longer. I hope when you do your debunking that sound will play in the background as you're lurking around finding answers. But we have many resources like that on the website that helps, that will give you an overview or a reminder of how something like reverse image search works. We also like Revi, reverse image search. In this instance, it's a Chrome extension, and you can have it search the various search engines. I think yours would be Yandex search. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. So
Yandex is
not us. They do? None of them?
None of them.
Okay. If I would be interested to know if there's a extension. Do you guys use extensions?
Yes.
Okay.
But can you add some kind of popular portals here?
I'm sorry?
We do have other local search engines.
Okay.
Can you add that to the
I don't know, but this has been a week of discovery of finding out what the tools you do have and what the needs are. So something. Let's see here. So the second step is the source. Who captured the content? There's lots of ways to try and find somebody. Claire, my boss, in this instance, we're using Skype. Skype can be a good first step in finding out who a person is and where they are. In this case, Claire's email is here, and it pops up that she's in London, the UK. The problem with that is I know for a fact she lives in New York. But again, it's a good first step. We know that Claire exists. She has a Gmail handle, and now it's up to us to find her on the web somewhere. When we were talking earlier about the imposter website, the ABC News website, a simple search with whois.ican.org will give you a good first step of finding who owns this domain name. If it's a major media company in the United States, that address, the admin contact, should be in New York. For a small fee, you can hide your information, and smart people often do. But we wanted to own the URL firstdraft.news so that nobody else would take it. And Claire's sister did not pay that extra small fee, and all of her information is right here. In fact, that's her mother's address for a bed and breakfast in Wales. So again, You hope for people like Jenny who are like, I'm not paying $20, and not for the people like Claire who are like, I'm not giving my information away. So again, a simple web search or a simple who is I can search would reveal that this is not the ABC News website. Right here we can see this, this gentleman, Paul Horner, is one of the biggest purveyors of fake news in the United States. I don't think he lives in Phoenix, but if this is ABC News, it should be in New York or even LA. I mean, I would give it to him if it were LA, but it's clearly a fake website. And that's one great way to sort of resolve who owns this and what their intentions might be. Another step is the date. When was the content captured? So for the platforms that we use the most, the timestamp, like Facebook, is dependent upon where your computer is sitting right now. So any post I make today on Facebook will have the timestamp of Korea. When I go home tomorrow, it'll be so cool that I wrote a post in the future, I think, right? We're going back in time? Anyway, but that's not true in Twitter. The time and date shown in your time zone is selected in your Twitter settings. So I will be posting, I think it's 10 at night in Indiana, where I'm from. So I would post from here, but the time and date would be wrong. So all of these social platforms, including the ones you use, are sometimes it's often based on where the server is sitting. So if there's a time difference in Korea with the platform you're using, then it will be wherever that server is sitting. Sometimes it's your settings. This comes into play when somebody makes a fake news claim. For example, there was a Syrian gas attack, and there was video of this, and it was uploaded to YouTube. The problem is that the YouTube servers are on Pacific time. So we're talking like it was posted and it was at 2 a.m. the next day, I think, if that's the way the time zones work. Putin, the president of Russia, said, this is fake news. There is no way that this happened because the timestamp is off. But what he doesn't know is that's not how YouTube works. YouTube is Pacific time. So it actually did happen, and it was precisely at that time. So all of these platforms have different time zones, different settings. Sometimes it's the settings in your phone that you dictate. Sometimes it's just wherever you happen to be. To verify information or to get closer to the truth of the piece of content that you're looking at, in this case a photo, somebody says, oh, there's been a shooting and it's happened in Midtown Manhattan. So what you can do is you can search by location, and you can search any time, or you can do a specific date, or you can say the last 30 days. If there's been some kind of big news event, in my example, a horrible example, but in my example, a shooting, you would see clusters of images here, and you would see maybe other images of people, maybe people running, maybe people, I don't know, eating ice cream, but you would see some kind of activity, and that's another indicator, and that website is GeoSearch Tool. So the location, where was the content captured? So again, this is another instance where the platforms sometimes let you tell people where you are. You can override it. Does anybody know what the percentage of people who use geolocation on their social posts? For our platforms, it's about 3%. So it used to be, in the early days of smartphones, people I don't think they had the setting to switch off your geolocation, and then people got smart and said, I don't want everybody to know. Most people don't have it switched on anymore. So in this case, this photo is not taken from Yemen. In fact, it's a scrape of a photo, and the person who uploaded it was in Yemen and decided to reveal their location. This is Instagram, and this is a photo of outside my window in Harlem, USA. But I decided to say, actually, I was in Perugia, Italy. This is not Perugia. So just because somebody says, just because I was dreaming of being in Italy does not mean I was in Italy. I was actually sitting on my couch, pointing the camera out the window. Does anybody know who this guy is? There's a big, do you? Yeah. This guy, the guy with the mustache, or, well, they both do, but this guy, the suspicious-looking one, he is John McAfee, and he has a big security antivirus for computers, so he's got a lot of money, right? And he was wanted for questioning in association with a murder, and people were trying to find him all over the place. This person at the time was editor-in-chief of Vice News, a news organization from Canada, and he went and asked for an interview. He also asked for a photo. Big mistake, because John McAfee said, sure, you can take my photo, just don't tell anybody where I am. But if you're a smart verifier, you will know exactly where he is by EXIF data. EXIF data is the information that travels with this photo. That's why scrapes can be so problematic, because once you scrape an image, you lose all of this good, juicy information, right? It even has his longitude and latitude where this photo was taken. And Jeffrey's EXIF viewer, what you'll find in the world of verification, at least in the English language, is that there are a lot of homegrown websites and tools that don't look very official, but in this case, Jeffrey created EXIF Viewer. So he decided to call it Jeffrey's EXIF Viewer, and he has all by taking this original photo, he could get all of this great information. That caught up with John McAfee because, let's see here, we're going forward. Because with that EXIF data, they were able to say, he's in Guatemala. In fact, he's right here in this pool or near this pool. And so within 2 days, the authorities had arrested him. So that's where this kind of information, you really can be a detective. You really can solve a crime. That's, to me, is one of the exciting parts of verifying. This is a screenshot of how Google Earth looks. To use, it's very specific. In fact, I want to get the details for you so that I can tell you exactly what it does. So Google, they have Earth Pro, which is actually in the rare instance when a pro part of the tool is free. And it just gives you lots of specific information. You can guess, or not guess, better than guessing. You can actually tell the distance between two places, and that often comes into play when you're trying to verify the location of a photo. Naver Maps, you guys use Naver more, right? Also a tool for that, and MapBadoo. And now onto motivation. Why was the content captured? So everybody has different reasons for uploading, sharing information. Sometimes, like the one on the far left, this person was just walking by and saw a news event or what they thought might be newsworthy, and they shot it. But other people are activists, and so they want to get their information out. And other people are helping with an NGO, and they want to get information out to people. As a verifier, one of the biggest issues is finding out who owns this content. If I'm holding the camera, and Lois pushes the red button and takes a photo of you, and then uploads it to Instagram, who owns the copyright on that photo? No. It's actually, you push the red button, right? Even though it's my camera, you push the button. Whoever pushes the red button is the owner of that photo, and they need to be credited for that. So it gets very tricky. It's like, it was maybe Irene's camera, but you pushed the button and I was holding it and we took it of all these people and then we put it to the platform, but the only person who owns it is you. So you would get credit in all those instances, or should be getting credit. It's kind of shameful how few news organizations track it down to give Lois credit for that photo that she took. So additional signs of misinformation on websites specifically, and these are things that we see a lot in the US. Things to look for. On a legitimate news site or report, you will often see a date stamp and a date line which says, I was in Korea, and it'll start, the story will say Korea hyphen, and then this report will start. A byline. Sources and links, because journalists love to refer to their past reporting, or things that give their report more authority, whether it's statistics or information. And consistency. You know, websites that have lots of headlines with all caps and exclamation parts and question marks in their headlines is likely not to be trusted. So again, to beware in headlines, all caps, that kind of thing. In images, you want to be very suspicious of bright blue skies. Bright blue skies are easily manipulated. It's easy to Photoshop. More birds, less birds. And the other thing, if there's a shark in any of the photos, it is probably false. This photo was sent to me by a friend from Ukraine who was worried about my safety because this was after a hurricane. And Hurricane Sandy, and this is one of the big business buildings in New York. But there were no sharks. I was totally safe. But sharks, blue skies are often very suspicious, or elements to be suspicious of in photos. So I hope through this process you got to see that verification is a process. It's useful for you to be able to tell your news editor where you are in the process of verifying. It's like, I can't find who took this, but I know where it was taken for sure because based on these checks, and I know the time that it was uploaded. So if you can get through the checks the provenance, the source, the date, the location, and the motivation, those are things that you can reveal to readers. It used to be, I think I mentioned before the break, it used to be that most newsrooms would say, yeah, we can't independently verify this. So we're either going to run it with no credit and no validity that it's actually authentic, or we are going to just not run it at all. And that doesn't help readers. Readers want to know. So you can even be transparent to readers. Where are you in the process? It's like, you know what? We don't know who owns this photo, but we have verified that it was captured where it said it was, that the location is exact, and when it happened, and then why. We know that the person who took it was a bystander, an eyewitness, who wanted information out there. So if you can be transparent with your readers, and be very clear with your editor where you are, then everybody will begin to see that it's a process and that you might not get all of these boxes checked, but you want to have more than, you want to have most of them checked. Let's see here. So you have the photo and video guides. We also have, in English only, we have a Chrome extension that does the same thing. The nice thing about this is we help you rate, it automatically rates the percentage of verification that you're in, and then that verification gets posted on our website. So if somebody has questions about how you verified and the percentage of validity from this piece of information, you can refer them to our website with your percentage, and you can also embed that within the story. And this was created we launched it about 4 months ago, but it was started a year ago when Chrome apps were all the rage. And I want to point out, and I think the translator was kind enough to say it's the day after April Fool's Day. There's International Fact-Checking Day. And On this website, there are a lot of resources. I think it's great to see that there are other people in this space who are going through the struggles you're going through, have the same questions you have. It might be different platforms, different languages, but these trends are surprisingly familiar in every country. So thank you very much.
네. 뭐 요번에 관련된 것도 있고 뭐 아까 앞전에 세션 1에 다양한 또 필요한 게 있으니까 하시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
네, 그 개인적인 경험이 좀 궁금한데요. 네. 이 페이크 뉴스나 아니면 팩트를 검증하는 이것 자체가 그 시민들의 이 합리적인 판단에 어떤 영향을 미칠지에 대해서 개인적으로 조금 회의적인 느낌을 좀 가지고 있습니다. 그러니까 예를 들면 대선 같은 굉장히 예민한 국면에 가면 시민들은 자신의 신념이나 정파성을 강화해 줄 수 있는 그런 페이크 뉴스를 더 선호하게 마련이고, 그게 페이스북에서 페이크 뉴스가 넘쳐나더라도 큰 문제의식 못 느끼는 이런 상황을 초래한다고 생각을 하는데요. 특히나 이제 한국 같은 경우는 언론의 정파성이 강하고, 그리고 언론에 대한 신뢰가 낮은 상황에서 실제 이런 팩트 체크가 시민들의 어떤 합리적인 판단에 과연 긍정적인 영향을 미치는지 솔직히 잘 모르겠더라고요. 그런 면에서 이 프랑스에서 크로스 체크를 해보셨을 때 이 팩트 체크나 어떤 페이크 뉴스에 대한 이 검증들이 시민들한테 어떤 영향을 미쳤는지 좀 이 사례를 들어주면서 알려주시면 참 고맙겠습니다.
You know, it's a living laboratory right now, cross-check, and we just don't know. We are excited to see the results. Like I said before, we don't know if the public trust will be gained by seeing 12 partners saying, yes, this is the truth, or this is false. We're still learning, and once we analyze the data for that, once we have researchers in to give their hypotheses and their findings, then we will add that information, that knowledge to the next cross-check project. We'd like to iterate cross-check in different countries, and hopefully establish an online verification newsroom that covers global questions. I think one of the people do trade junk online all the time, and because of the use of mobile, it goes very fast. It's a hyper speed of news in general. But what I'm heartened by is how many people do want to know the truth, how many people are frustrated. And I hope that frustration level exceeds the current amount of sharing of bogus information. I think, again, the US would probably still not think that there's a fake news problem had things gone as they were projected to go by all of the polls. So maybe, I don't know what that means for Korea, if more people will be upset if the election doesn't go in a way that they anticipate, or if there's something very frustrating in the process of getting a new official elected.
네, 아까 사진 검증하는 얘기를 하시면서 그 LCF 데이터나 뭐 사진 파일에 있는 메타데이터 관련해서 말씀을 하셨는데요. 이런 것들이 사실은 기술적으로 쉽게 조작이 가능한 부분으로 알고 있는데, 그런 부분에 대해서 퍼스트 드래프트에서는 고민하거나 아니면 다른 기술 전문가들과 협의를 하시는 게 있나요?
That's the problem. One of the problems of social platforms is that they remove a lot of metadata from images and content that gets uploaded for file size reasons. It increases the download times of people on the platform, and they want to prioritize a great experience for their users. So it's a problem with verifying. That's why, as verifiers, if you can get your hands on the original, it's so there's so much rich information. You can find out what type of camera or phone was used. With First Draft, we have other tools. We can provide a link list we can give to Lois of other tools. They're mostly in English, and it gets really detailed. We didn't want to have such a detailed training here, but if there's interest in this room for those resources, we can absolutely do it. Sometimes it's just a matter of being exposed to one version of it and then creating it internally for, in your language for platforms that make sense for you to use. Oh, yeah.
So I worked as an investigative reporter for a number of years, most recently with Reuters, and also teach investigative journalism as well. And so one thing I always say in my talks is that these tools, your point about the fact that metadata can be changed is absolutely true. And what I always view all of these tools, particularly metadata, it can help you to see if something is not real, but it does not mean that it is real. So it's, we can't rely only on the tool. As reporters, as journalists, we need to use all of our other senses and our reporting skills to follow up and make sure. So that, we don't say, oh, well, the metadata says it's where it's supposed to be, that means it's good, right? We have to then say, okay, like the examples that Amy gave, the sky looks a little too blue, or, I don't think sharks can actually go to New York. We should not let the tool blind us to all the training that we have had as reporters for so long, for sure. And that's something I always, because it's so easy for us to say, well, data is true, it's pure. Anyone can manipulate data. So we need to make sure that we use that as just one part of our whole toolkit for reporting.
Yeah, and to add to that, these are just examples of one or two tools to use. The verification process doesn't stop once you, for example, I showed you Claire's Skype handle. If you just stopped there, you'd be like, oh, she lives in the UK. You wouldn't find her there, So these things can be indicators, but it's just like you wouldn't report a story with just one source or one unnamed source. You would probably have two to confirm. It's the same thing with your online verification. All of the reporting skills that you have absolutely are needed in verifying, and you need two sources. So on almost all of these applications that I showed you, there's like 3 other versions of it.
First Draft 팀의 가장 큰 의미 중 하나가 언론사들의 협업을 이끌어내는 데 있다고 생각하는데요. 프랑스 언론들의 참여를 이끌어내는 데 어려움은 없으셨는지, 그리고 그 참여를 이끌어냈던 그 구체적인 과정이 궁금합니다.
What was great about beginning First Draft is we amassed a coalition of 90 news organizations. So when we knew that the French election was something we wanted to work on, we knew we had at least 5 newsroom partners in France to already tap and say, hey, does this sound like a project you want to join? Again, I think people were rocked by Brexit. They were rocked by the US election results, and they didn't want their country to also fall to prey to misinformation. So I think that there was a real desire from the French news partners to get this right and to collaborate. I don't know the specific egos involved, though I'm sure as journalists there's some egos involved, no doubt. But I think, as I said earlier, the small newsroom partners were so excited to be able to learn this and to have the leverage of larger news organizations to learn from, and the larger news organizations were so happy to have somebody in smaller towns, so that they understood what was like the popular sentiment in smaller places.
웹기관 말고 모바일에서 체크할 수 있는 어플이라던가 다른 가이드라인이 있나요?
You mean for verifying? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, all of this information is likely to be on a mobile view at some point, but the verification, I feel like you need a keyboard and mouse sometimes. I mean, it's more detailed. Does it make sense? And a lot of these tools, like the EXIF data thing that I showed you, it was done at home. Like somebody did it in his bedroom and like put it together. It's not like it's this thing that is responsive to mobile and to tablet. I mean, he probably did it on a desktop computer, and so we're very limited in that way. But it's just the tools for right now. Maybe we'll design one. Something I learned new this week actually was to search for Twitter lists. Does everybody use lists to help in their reporting? Do you know what lists? I can just take you through a list quickly. If you have a subject that you're covering, you can. Oh, shoot. Okay, Twitter lists are often curated by people. Sometimes it's by subject, topic, cohort, if there are other people covering the topic. And so Twitter lists are a great resource to help you find resources for the topic that you're covering. One of the search strings that you can do outside of the platform on your preferred search engine is doing lists, twitter.com / and then you use the let's see here. You know what? I can probably type it in here at the top. 1 second. So let's see here. Okay, so by typing in, I wanted information on Hong Kong. I typed in list, twitter.com.
Semicolon, just colon?
Colon. The 2 dots. Yep.
트위터.com 하고요. 그다음에 슬래시하고 그다음에 이게 벨터우시하고 다시 슬래시 리스트 복수로 리스트.
And this asterisk here means anything within those parameters / lists. So you will be served up the lists that are about Hong Kong. Let's see here. Let's see here. And so you can search within a subject and find information against sources to report on. Oh, sorry. Do I need to repeat that, or you guys?
No, for the translator.
Oh, for the translator. Okay. So by typing in, darn it. By typing in a colon or in quotes Hong Kong, which is the search criteria I want, list twitter.com, and then the asterisk between the 2 hashes makes it anything within Hong Kong, and then the lists. And those can be very useful in terms of finding lists that other people have curated for sources for the topic.
Does it work with the blank or check a little?
What's that?
Does it work with the blank, like
Maybe the Hong Kong, you put the blank. And how about the capital letter?
I don't think it's case sensitive. No.
이거 구글 검색인데 구글 검색은 대문자 소문자 상관없고요. 띄어쓰기 네.
But you know, we could do after this. We can do a short. Like if people want to crowd around the laptop, we can go through some of the Twitter advanced searches if you want. But this was a new thing for me to learn this week, and I thought that was really cool. So, and if you use TweetDeck, that's also very useful to curate the conversations that you're looking for.
And you can copy the lists.
What do you mean, copy list?
You can copy other people's lists.
Yes. Yep. And be a subscriber to it or a member of it. So.
And Amy, would you show the reverse image search? Reverse image search can show.
Is it true? IZTRU.com is a website for one type of reverse image search. It was created by the makers of Photoshop. So what they're looking at when you do a reverse image search is provenance. Like, is this an original file? Have there been layers added to it? Is it compressed? They're doing a battery of tests. So could you upload that image we just did? So it's going to go through a series of checks on it, and oftentimes I get something that just sends me to another reverse image search, which is it looks like something we cannot verify that this is the original, so something may or may not have happened. Do we have to do something here?
It's uploading and it's done.
So it says our forensic tests suggest this file has been resaved since initial capture, which is true. We just resaved it, right? And because this file is not a camera original, it is possible that it was modified. That's not fun to get, right? You're like, I thought this was going to solve all my problems, but it's just one step in verifying if this photo is original or not. Another search that you can do is Google reverse image search. So just like we did with the Mali photo, it was like it came up more than once, and we knew that the origin of that photo was not true. This, I'm not sure what this says, but it should say something along the lines that this photo or this image was from the New York Times. Does it say something like that? Or a link to it? Right. So this is, again, another check that it's likely an original image, or not an original image, but it's not floating around out there. So, for instance, the example that I showed you of the children holding each other, if you asked people to just do a reverse image search, you would see that this photo has been in circulation since 2007, oftentimes just by searching in regular Google, you know, and then selecting images. So again, that's often an indicator. Some of the most frustrating things about verifying is that you're never entirely sure. You can do 3 or 4 checks and you can get very close to the truth. And that's really all at this point you can do, because a lot of people lie or scrape or alter images. Does that help?
네, 구글 이미지로 가면요, 그러니까 검색어를 넣어서 이미지를 검색할 수도 있고, 이미지를 이렇게 드래그해서 이미지를 검색하는 게 있습니다. 그러니까 이 같은 경우는 이미지를 검색하면 거꾸로 이 이미지가 어디 들어있는지를 각각 그 웹사이트들이 되게 많이 나와 있어서 그거를 좀 보고 다른 사이트가 뭐가 있구나 이런 걸 좀 알 수 있다. 그게 좀 포인트였습니다. 여기 구글 이미지.
And in terms of news literacy, if we could teach everybody to just Google this image and see where it's popped up, and they would see it in 100 other places, people would learn more from the origin of that photo.
And one more test that would you show how to use the Chrome extension of first draft images?
Yep. The extension automatically pulls the URL. So be sure you have that image before you do the check, because it's with a URL image, not with something that you upload.
Do you want an example of a photo?
You know, I can go through the example we have on First Draft.
Okay.
of that might be the most beneficial, because I know we'll get the results we want with that. News check takes you through the information on the sheets of paper that you have for photos and videos. And what you do is you upload or you give the URL of the image, and it will take you through the prompts. Are you looking at the original? Do you know who captured? Do you know where the photo was captured and when the photo was captured? Then you'll push save on each one of those. You'll say yes or no. It'll have a varying degrees of verification, with red being the reverse image search returns identical photos indexed online, so that's you want to stay out of the red, all the way to green that yes, we know exactly who took this photo. So for this particular example of the London Underground, Claire, my boss, got 62%. She knew that she was looking at an original photo, so we got a check there. But we're not sure exactly who captured the photo or where the photo was captured. So the nice thing about this is that there's, so for this, again, if you're getting pushback from your boss, like, where are you in this process? You can show them very clearly, whereas before you're like, I can't verify it, but now you can. This to me looks like something that would be worth running because there's no red and there's more green, or there's 2 greens that you have on it. This information is then on the First Draft news site. So if you see this organization as an authority, or you want to send somebody else, like these are the checks that I took, and you can see people's steps, if that makes sense, on the website. So it's a third party that's hosting your information, which sort of like your professional social media accounts, you're less inclined probably to lie on there, and more if something is public, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Like LinkedIn, I'm thinking that people are less inclined to lie about their, less inclined. I'm not saying that they won't. But that's a brief tour of NewsCheck. It's just a digital version of the guides. The guides, I think, we've heard back from many reporters who like to have it next to their computer as just sort of a reminder to go down the list.
오늘 오신 분들이 대부분 언론사에서 오신 분들이겠죠. 그래서 이 질문을 좀 드리고 싶은데요. 팩트체크가 언론사 안에서 어떻게 이루어지는가 이런 부분입니다. 그래서 지금 좀 사회 단체나 어떤 여러 가지 기구에서 뉴스 검증을 하는 그런 여러 프로세스나 그런 절차를 말씀해 주시는데요. 그런 부분은 이제 예컨대 대한 매체, 얼터너티브 미디어 같은 경우는 훨씬 중요한 것 같습니다. 메인스트림 미디어 같은 경우는 그 미디어 안에서 팩트체크가 이루어지는 것이 정상적인 과정으로 정상적으로. 그래서 이런 작업을 하는 필요성이 커진 것이 기존 미디어에서 팩트체크를 하는 기능이 많이 떨어졌는지 저는 그런 점이 좀 있다고 보거든요. 왜냐하면 뭐 여러 가지 경제 관계라든지 언론사의 어떤 뭐 축소 이런 부분에서 팩트 체크를 하는 그런 기능들을 가장 먼저 좀 희생시키는 그런 측면들이 있는 것 같고요. 또 좋은 의미의 게이트키핑 같은 경우들이 필요한데 최근에는 여러 가지 이유로 또 각 일선에서 기자들이 생산하는 기사가 바로 웹사이트나 여러 가지 형태로 바로 독자들에게 전달되는 그런 측면들이 좀 있어서 기존에 뭐 저희가 흔히 얘기하는 이상적인 사례, 슈피겔의 80명 팩트체커들이라든지 뉴욕커 같은 경우도 잘 하고 있다고 알고 있는데 그런 어떤 정상적인 팩트체킹의 구조가 언론사에서 여전히 잘 이루어지고 있는지 미국 같은 경우는요. 또 그게 여전히 앞으로도 필요한지 그런 부분을 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
We need more training. I mean, most journalists, most news organizations are traditional news organizations. The digital space is new for them. The thought of that the even possibility of being able to verify a photo is foreign. Maybe not to new reporters, but to older people who are in management, who are making hiring decisions, who are making training decisions, who either spend the resources and the effort to create a verification desk, or say that's not necessary. You know, we can just run it. A lot of people say it's fair use. We can just steal it from the internet. That can kind of work in breaking news, but it doesn't work as a long-term solution. I think one of the biggest mandates that First Draft has is to establish standards so that newsrooms, large and small, are following these same steps, have the same process, and then we can also get together, large and small newsrooms, and say, this isn't working for us, or we've noticed this new trend. And so it's important for us to take this, this new component of reporting seriously, to train people, to have the resources to it, allocated for it, and it's, I think one of the biggest problems is upper management not understanding these steps. So I think we need to have training for people who are actually doing the verification, and then a modified training for decision makers to explain to them why this is so important and how easy it is. You know, I think the reporters who were sitting in front of those photos of the video game, I think they'd be so upset if they knew that in advance, but that it only took a few minutes to try and find that photo, you know, and to verify it. We had somebody say to us the other day, this takes a lot of time. It's like, but you saw on that video, it takes 20 seconds to verify a photo. So it doesn't take time, it takes skills and desire to want to root out misinformation.
기존의 그 뉴스 미디어에서 가지고 있는 팩트 체크의 기능이 여전히 중요하긴 한 것이죠. 그리고 그런 기능을 제대로 하기 위해서 퍼스트 드래프트나 이런 쪽에서 여러 가지 기준을 만든다 그런 말씀드리죠.
You know, we do more not with fact-checking, but verification. Fact-checking for American newspapers doesn't really happen, meaning the deadline is so tight and so fast that we really trust the reporters to get it right and copy editors to make sure that that specifics in the reporting are accurate, and other editors too. But when you're talking about magazines do fact check if they have a weekly or longer deadline. So, you know, it'd be great for more fact checking. I think the problems that we're seeing have to do with verification and lack of verification, which mostly happens post-publication. We're trying to get it before publication. And that it's separate from just, I mean, it gets lumped together because it's kind of the same type of investigative hat for both, but they're and they can often have the same process to it.
And I think it's good to describe more what is the fact check, what is verification. You have that slide.
Right, we had the slide. Yep. I had that slide. I'll go over it again. So the difference with fact checking, it often happens before publication with sources that are verified. Verification often it stems from user-generated content that you have to verify the origin, who took it, where it was taken. So fact-checking is with named sources, and it's typical. I want to say typical reporting, in-person reporting on businesses. Verification is with specific pieces of content and looking for the origin. And ideally, we get that process before it happens. So then cross-check would disseminate information before news started about that problematic photo, if that makes sense. But right now, it seems we're verifying a lot after the fact, after it's out there. As we saw with the children, the original misguided information was circulated twice as much as the correction. So.
Can I jump back to the technical guideline again? For the when the forecatcher, you explained about the exit data, and it was part of fast. So
oh, sorry.
Can you show that again?
The exit data. Can I get the computer back here? Whoever's I used. One of the problems with that's one of the biggest problems with scrapes is you won't have that rich information. Photo websites like Flickr. Do you use Flickr, or is that? It's really not popular anymore. It was. I think it's because it's tied to Yahoo. But and and more people use not Yahoo these days. But there is, let's see here. I think the most important thing from this part of the presentation is this tool, Jeremy's EXIF data. So if you're looking at the original content, it will screen for that and produce this information here. It will give you the location, the date that it was shot. So again, sometimes the type of camera that was used. And that's why it's so important. And as Irene pointed out, this kind of information can be adjusted. But it's just one check in a series of checks for information about the photo.
So how can you reach those boxes?
How can what?
How can you reach? How can you get to those boxes?
Oh, I will send you on the link list. I will send you the link to Jeffrey's EXIF viewer, and you and Jeffrey will be friends by the end of the week. Yeah.
네, 아무래도 크로스 체크에 대한 경험이 궁금해서 여쭤보는데요. 사실 저는 팩트 체크라는 행위 자체가 정파적일 수 있다고 생각을 합니다. 왜냐하면 폭스 뉴스가 힐러리 것만 계속 페이크 뉴스도 팩트를 검증을 하게 된다면 우리는 특정인에 대한 부정적인 네거티브한 어떤 효과를 기대하면서 팩트 체킹을 시도할 수 있다고 생각을 하는데 크로스 체크는 제가 알기로는 시민이 팩트 체크의 대상들을 올릴 수 있도록 하잖아요. 그런 측면에서 이런 팩트 체크 행위에 들어가는 방타성이 시민의 참여로 인해서 사실 좀 보정되는 효과가 있었는지 이게 좀 궁금합니다.
Sure. I mean, yes. I mean, every person has an agenda, and with reporting, you hope that you're going to stick close to the truth. But the nice thing with verification is we can rely more on actual facts than assumptions and things as we just glance at it. And what's so powerful about the work of somebody like Elliot Higgins with Bellingcat is he has all of these facts. He only verifies things that are open source to the public. He could tap into space programs, satellite images and stuff. He doesn't. He uses tools that are available to you and to me. And he does his reporting based on that. And there are going to be people who will argue with facts. And again, that's their right, I suppose. But it's how much airtime we give that. I don't know each news organization's political agenda, and if they have one. But it's it's a frustration. But luckily, the space that we're operating in, it deals with facts and not opinions. And Irene?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. So of course, people have their political views. News organizations sometimes have their own political views as well. And so we want to separate using information for an agenda from fact-checking. Somebody may call something fact-checking, but it may not actually be fact-checking. But your question that I thought was very interesting is about how do readers or normal people participate in this kind of fact-checking work. And so there was actually a very interesting experiment that The Guardian did in the UK, where they got a huge data set about how their members of parliament were spending money, basically the expenses. It was a lot of information, and they could not go through it all by themselves. So they actually put the data online and then asked people to look through the data and comment on it. And so what they did was they used that as tips or clues to then do their own reporting. So, they use the crowd to help them to sort through this big data. And I think one of the reasons why it's so powerful is because newsrooms, we have limited resources, so you only have a few reporters who can work on something, and they don't have the local knowledge. So if you're, doing something like The Guardian, people who live in a small town, they know their politician, they know the restaurants and the stores that are there, so they may be able to look at the expenses and say, hey, that bar has been closed for 10 years. I know that. They can then use that to help, using their local knowledge to help reporters be able to do better reporting. The other thing is there are actually crowdsourced efforts to do fact-checking. So, for example, in Indonesia, there are 2 initiatives, one in particular, the Anti-Hoax Society, and they are actually, when they see these viral stories that are coming out, they will actually do this kind of work, the photo verification, the video verification, and they have volunteers who are doing the fact-checking or the verification. Then they put it onto their own website to let people know that it's not real.